My name is William Michael, the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'd like to provide students with a simple walk through the second lesson in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Latin Grammar 1 course. In this lesson, we're going to study the second lesson in Alvarez's Latin grammar. Up top here, you can see we're studying Liber Primus. That means the first book of the grammar. And we're studying Etymologia, which means etymology. That's actually the second part of the art of grammar. The first part is orthography. The second part is etymology. The third part is syntax. And the fourth part will be prosody. In our previous lesson, we studied chapter 1 here. We walked through these 9 points. We learned about the letters of the Latin alphabet. We learned that the letters are divided into vowels and consonants. We learned that there are 6 vowels and the rest of the letters are consonants. We then learned that syllables are made out of letters. We then learned about diphthongs. We learned that there are 6 diphthongs, these right here. We then learned that a word is made out of syllables and that speech is made out of words. So that was the content of lesson 1, and now we're going to move on into lesson 2. Just to help prepare us for lesson 2, it's important to note point 9 here. Speech is made out of words, dictionibus. Speech is made out of words. Therefore, words are considered the parts of speech. The speech is the whole. The words are the parts of speech. And if you look at section 2 here, you see that the title of section 2 is Partes Orationis, or the parts of speech. So here in section 2, we're going to study the parts of speech. And really, you should know that this word that we saw at the top of the page, etymology, is really the study of the parts of speech. So etymology is the study of the parts of speech, and here in lesson 2, we learn what the parts of speech are. Now, the reason why this is important is because if we were to say that we wanted to learn the Latin language, and we learn that speech is made out of words, well, if we want to learn how to speak rightly, or to understand speech in Latin, we would have to then study all of the words of Latin, since they're the parts of the language, and the speech is composed of those parts, of words. But we know that there are thousands and thousands of Latin words, so how would we possibly study all of the words of the Latin language? How could we ever gain a mastery of the language if we have to study all of the words? That would be impossible. Well, what wise men have figured out for us is that even though there are thousands and thousands of words, all of the different words can be grouped into 8 different classes. 8 different classes. And if we learn these 8 different classes, and we learn about these 8 different classes, then we will understand the characteristics of all of the words. And we'll simply need to know what part of speech or what group each word belongs to. And so when we study the parts of speech, the partes orationis, what we study are the 8 classes into which the parts of speech can be grouped. We study the characteristics of each of these parts of speech or each of these different groups, and that gives us a knowledge of all of the words of the Latin language. So that's what we're going to begin studying here in lesson 2, Partes Orationis, the parts of speech. So let's walk through here. Here's point number 1 in lesson 2, and here you see point number 2. Let's translate this together, and after we've translated it, we'll make some notes. We read here, Partes orationis sunt octo. Partes orationis sunt octo, and that simply means the parts of speech are 8. The parts of speech are 8. Octo is the Latin word for 8. We could also read this as there are 8 parts of speech. Either translation would be good, but the best translation is always that which stays closest to the original Latin word order. So the parts of speech are 8 is the best translation. And then we have a list of the 8 parts of speech. The first is nomen, which means noun. Nomen, noun. Second, pronomen, pronoun. Pronomen, pronoun. Then we have verbum, a verb. Verbum, a verb. Then we have participium, participium. In English, this is a participle. And a participle is a word that participates in the characteristics of both nouns and verbs. So a participle is a word that participates in the qualities of both nouns and verbs. And these are the first 4 parts of speech. And it's important that we make a division between the first 4 and the last 4, as we'll see down in point 2 below. So we have noun, pronoun, verb, and participle. Next we have prepositio. Prepositio, which means preposition. And if we look at this word, we see positio, which means placed, and then pre means before or in front of. So preposition or prepositio is a word that is set before another noun in speech that expresses some relationship. We then have adverbium. Adverbium. An adverb is a part of speech which is added adverbium to a verb to add some quality to the verb or the manner in which the action of the verb is performed, an adverb. Then we have interjectio. Inter means between, and jectio means set or thrown in between. Interjectio. In English, this is the interjection. Interjection. And what an interjection is an expression of an emotion in the midst of speech. So that's where we get interjection from. It's the expression of an emotion in the midst of speech. So for example, if someone is talking and they get frightened and they yell, "Ah!" that expression, "ah," is an interjection. Or if we're showing something to someone and all of a sudden there's a surprising event and we say, "Whoa!" That "whoa" is another interjection. So any word that simply expresses an emotion is an interjection. And then lastly, we have conjunctio. Conjunctio, we have the preposition or the prefix con, which means with, and junctio means joined, joined with. A conjunction is a word that joins other words or parts of a sentence together. So the 8 parts of speech are noun, pronoun, verb, participle, preposition, adverb, interjection, and conjunction. These are the 8 parts of speech. These are the 8 different groups of words. All words can be placed into one of these 8 different groups, the 8 groups of the parts of speech. Now in point 2, we're just going to learn something simple but very important about the 8 parts of speech. We read here in point 2, harum quatuor nomen. Harum quatuor, of these, harum quatuor, 4. Of these 8 parts of speech, 4. And then we have a list. Nomen, pronomen, verbum, participium, declinantur. So of these 8 parts of speech, 4 declinantur, are declined. And which four are declined? These four here. Nomen, pronomen, verbum, and participium. So of the 8 parts of speech, the first 4 are declined. And what that means is that the first 4 parts of speech, the words have a number of different forms. They're declined. Their forms change to express different ideas. The first 4 parts of speech, noun, pronoun, verb, and participle, are declined. They have different forms. The other 4 parts of speech, Prepositio, Adverbium, Interjectio, and Conjunctio, declinationis sunt expertes. Of these, 4 are declined. Preposition, adverb, interjection, and conjunction of declension are free. Expertes means free. So these 4 are free of declension, or are free from declension. That means they have no declension. So prepositions, adverbs, interjections, and conjunctions are words that have only one form in Latin. So these are very easy to learn because we simply learn one word, and that's all there is to know about that word. Whereas the other 4 parts of speech, nomen, pronomen, verbum, and participium, they have multiple forms. So for every word, we need to learn a whole set of forms to express different ideas. So that's really all that there is to study here in lesson 2 on the parts of speech. Know that there are 8 parts of speech. Know the names and translation of the 8 parts of speech. And then know that of the 8 parts of speech, 4, the noun, pronoun, verb, and participle, are declined, and what it means to be declined. And 4, preposition, adverb, interjection, and conjunction, are free of declension. They have no declension, only one form for each of these 4 different groups of words. And that's all for this second lesson in Alvarez's Latin grammar. Now, why this is important is because in Latin grammar, for these first 4 parts of speech, nouns, pronouns, verbs, and participles, we're going to have to learn all of their different forms. And that's what we're going to study for most of our time in Latin Grammar 1. We're going to study the forms of nouns, pronouns, verbs, and participles. And then at the very end of Latin Grammar 1, we're going to study the prepositions, adverbs, interjections, and conjunctions. So the forms of the first 4 parts of speech will take up most of our study in Latin Grammar 1. And then just learning the simple words and their meanings for the last 4 parts of speech will bring us to the end of Latin Grammar 1. So that's all for lesson 2. What I'd like you to do is study the lesson, watch this video to help you learn the translation. It's very simple, just a few words to translate, nothing difficult. Learn the translation, complete the lesson assessment, and we'll continue our study of Latin grammar. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, please contact me. I'd be happy to help you. Now it's time for you to go and study your lesson for math.